These are the facts. The man I was raised to believe was my father did commit numerous crimes. He was a thief, a liar, a rapist, a sadistic torturer, and a murderer. He has been trained by his government to kill swiftly, cleanly, without conscience, to dispose of the body in such a manner that no one will figure out who they are or where they are. He practiced all of these things on his wife and children. He severely abused us sexually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. He found pleasure in torture, humiliation, pain, and having someone beg for their life.
So how do I know he was a serial killer? My first memory of him killing someone goes back to when I was really young. We lived in Georgia. I had a friend that was younger than me. I was 3 or 4 years old. I had a younger friend. He told me to get this boy Robbie into the car. We were going to go and get ice cream. He made sure that Robbie's parents hadn't seen him get in the car, and he raped him, beat him to death with his fists, but pretty much tore his body apart with his bare hands, and buried him directly across the street from where we lived at Camp Gordon.
And then things started to come back for me. I could be standing in a supermarket, I could be watching television, I could be sleeping, and it would come back to me. And I started to remember, and the first thing I remembered was about the bag under the house. And Stephen comes over to me and he whispers in my ear, "There's a lady in the bag." And I'm like, no, Stephen's trying to scare me. This can't be true, it can't be true. And then he said to her, "I felt her leg. It's shaved." Well, when my father came home, she starts yelling and raging at him, "Whatever it is, get it out from under the house." And he's laughing, he's sitting down, he's gonna have something to eat. He thinks it's funny, it's no big deal.
He was bragging. He was making us aware of everything he was doing.
If you started to not react, if you didn't get this grimace on your face, or you didn't cringe, or you didn't show any emotion, then he had to take it a step further. "Oh, okay, they don't believe me. Let's go for a Sunday drive." And then we would drive, and he would stop, and he'd say, "Who's buried there? What's there?" And if you told him, you got the punch in the kidney, and if you didn't tell him, you got the punch in the kidney. It was like no-win situation. And then he would take us for ice cream. And a lot of times, especially in the winter like this, he promised to take us for ice cream, and he'd know that the ice cream store was closed. And he'd put us through all of this turmoil about whether we could get ice cream or not, if we could remember parts of his story or who he had killed or whatever. And we'd get there and it'd be closed. And then he'd say, "Ha ha, your bad luck. My good luck, I don't have to spend any money on you." And he'd drive back home, drop us off, go off to some bar somewhere.
Do you have memories of your father doing physical abusive things to you, physical, sexual?
Oh yeah. Most of his violence was, to somebody like this, violence is sex. You don't have one without the other. So yeah, I've been molested. Most of the people that he killed got molested. Half the time after they were dead.
When you started, had you remembered any murders?
No. At first, all I remembered was the abuse. And I figured, hey, I've been abused. I've been really treated badly. This has been messing me up. I want to be a better husband to my wife. I'm not going to let anything stand in the way of that. So I'll find a psychologist who deals with this, and I'll get this out of the way. We started working on the techniques of a chart of sorts. You write down what happened, how you felt, how you dealt with it, a better way of dealing with it. And this brings up more memories. You deal with one thing, it brings up another. Well, It took 3 weeks, and I started remembering the murders. There was a countertop here running this way. My father hit the guy with the frying pan, and he dropped on the other side of this counter. Then the guy looking for him came in, and he was standing around here, asking where he was, yelling about how irresponsible these guys are. And then he just happens to walk around and see him. And that's when he and my father started choking each other. And like I said, one was just fighting, and one was killing. One of the most pitiful sights I've ever seen is this idiot trying to drag 2 dead men through the rain and 6-inch deep mud, slipping and falling, cursing in the rain. That's my dad.
So you were convinced that he did kill on that scale?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, okay, this guy, John Wayne Gacy, when he finally got caught, in the crawl space of his house, he had 32 boys. Now, how did he get 32 boys in his basement? And when these 32 boys were missing, did that make the paper? Was there an article in the paper that said there are 32 boys missing? We don't know where they are. It's just not there. But then, after the fact, it's completely believable. And somebody could be a lot smarter than that guy, Gacy. He's smart enough to use a family as a front, as a cover. Ruthless enough to do that.
The first thing that people ask is, how could he have done this and gotten away with it? How could he have been so prolific and gotten away with this? The second one is why didn't you tell before? And we did tell before. And even as we tell now as adults, with all of our resources and intelligence and capabilities, it seems even more unbelievable than when we told as children, because we weren't believed then either. And we're going over the 10 Commandments, and they get to the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And I raised up my hand and I said to the nun, well, what about if you're a soldier? And she said, well, soldiers aren't allowed to kill either. It's against God, you'll go to hell, but they can get a special dispensation from the Pope. And I pressed it, well, what about if your father's a soldier and he kills women and children? This is a kind of a shocking question for a 6-year-old in a classroom of other 6-year-olds to ask a nun. Like, where is this coming from? Where does the 6-year-old get this idea to say, well, what if your father's a soldier, but he kills women and children? And the nun says, sometimes in war, women and children get killed, but soldiers really don't mean to do it. And I said, well, what about if your father's a soldier and he's killing women and children here in your town? And that's when it was like, now she's after me, because she can't believe, there's no belief here. I'm a troublemaker. And she grabs me and she tells me to come up and sit down in front of the class till it's over. She calls another nun in. She asks me if I have any brothers or sisters in the other classes, and I say, I have my brother Stephen. And she says to me, we're going to have to go tell the priest. Are you willing to tell the priest what you're telling me? And I said, yes. And she says, you're going to go to hell if you're lying.
You go to the cops. Now, you're saying to them, look, these things happen in this area on this massive scale, really, large number of murders over a period of time. They initially appear to believe you.
Right.
Search and search with you, don't find anything. It's not, I mean, what else can they do in that circumstance? They don't have anything to go on.
Yeah, can't say I blame them. If I was to do it again, I wouldn't ask them to dig until the memories were more clear. Because at first they had more enthusiasm, but the memories were very fresh, and the details weren't there. I gotta admit, my dad was a very smart man. He knew this day would come. He knew that when I got into my later in life, my 40s, that I would remember, and I would come back and actually dig where I had seen him bury people.
The problem is that he has been getting rid of evidence all his life, all of this. When we would go down to visit our grandmother, we had to stop at garbage cans off of the turnpike in the parkway. He would always have a bag or two that he had to throw away along the way. I believe that he's kept souvenirs, but I don't think that he has anything more than some souvenirs, maybe some skulls. There's a possibility. There's a possibility that it's there, but there's a good possibility there isn't. You know? Stephen feels differently.
I think the souvenirs are the one thing that he really does value in life, the one thing he wouldn't want to be without. And I think he'd want to keep them close to him. So I think he's gotten rid of some things, but I think some things are so sacred to him that he would just hide them really well. This is the steps going down into the basement. He's dug, he's filled in, he's built walls, torn the walls down, tunneled. Sure enough, I found he had broken through the foundation, cut a door through the foundation, and dug another room. So an alarm went off in my head. I immediately, instead of writing, I just called the police and I told them, look, he's dug a room in his basement. I know this guy, I know what that room is for. Now he's staking himself out around the neighborhood. Somebody's got to do something. His wife is gone, my brother's in California, he's all alone. What's going to happen is you're going to wind up with a dead boy in the weeds, and it's going to be in your town.
If he wasn't in that house, I didn't have to see him. I didn't have to face him. I would go right away. It'd be the first thing I'd do. Start looking, digging, searching for anything. My father said, have him give you his phone number so that we can take him on a picnic, but don't let anybody know. My father found the house, pointed to the doors. He says, that's where he lives. We drove around the corner and he hid around the corner. So Jimmy and I get in as quickly as we can and climb into the back seat, and he tells us to lay our heads down. So we drove down the road a little bit, and my father asked Jimmy if he wants to drive the car. And you know, Jimmy's like real excited about this. He's real excited about the car, and my father gets him in the car, and he makes it so that Jimmy's sitting behind the wheel, but he's got his foot on the gas and his hand, and he's shifting, and you know, it's like he's Jimmy's little kid. He's driving, and then he says, okay, now you're going to have to pay for driving the car. And Jimmy's like, well, I don't have any money. How am I going to pay for it? And so I know what's going to happen. It's like, oh God, I can't believe that this is going to happen, and it's all my fault. I should have never. I should have known. I shouldn't have let him do it. And I don't know exactly how he did it because I didn't watch. I just couldn't stand the thought of watching it, but I know he was sodomizing them because that's what he did to all the little boys. And I could hear that glove compartment open when Jimmy started to cry. It's hurt, you're hurting me, you're hurting me. And he opened the glove compartment because he always kept a tube of Vaseline in there. He took the Vaseline out, and then he says, does that feel better? Is that better? You like this, you know you like this. He gets done with them, and Jimmy's crying, and he's all messed up, and he's yelling, and why did you do that to me? How could you do that to me? And he got sick on himself, and my father got really pissed off, and he reached over, and he opened up the door, and he just pushed him out, and then he yells at Steve and I, go clean him up, do something about this, go clean him up.
This place has come back to me in my dreams, in my nightmares, and for years and years it just came back so much, and I could never place it. You know, why does this place come back to me in my mind? What is so important about this place? It just keeps coming back and coming back. My dad parked right about here, and took Jimmy and put him into this brick pump house. It had an older door, and he slammed the door shut.
He puts him in there, he puts up a fight, he's screaming, "Why are you doing this to me? I want my dad, I want my dad." And he gets Jimmy out, and he starts shaking him and roughing him up, and my father puts on this really deep, evil, mean voice, and he says to him, "Your father doesn't care about you. Your father says to do anything I want with you. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care if you die." And Jimmy just really starts screaming. Then he starts hitting Steven and messing with his head and pushing him around, and he hands him a knife and he tells him to attack Jimmy. And it's like, it's just so insane. All of it is so crazy, and he just keeps telling me he's trying to hurt his sister. He's going to hurt all of us. He's going to hurt your family. Pretty soon, Steven he can't do anything, but he just like strikes out at him, and it hits Jimmy in the shoulder back here. The knife hits him, and he's shocked, and he's backed off. And why did you do that to me? How could you do that to me? And Steven's like, I don't know, and my father's screaming, stab him again, and Steven's like, no, I can't do this. And so my father grabs him and he says, "You won't do it, well, I'll do it, I'll take care of it. If you can't take care of your sister and protect your mother and your family." And he drags him over, and he picks him up, and he throws him down into this hole with water in it. And he's screaming, and you can hear the water rushing. My father comes back, and Steven starts to try to reason with him, saying, "You can't, he's just a little boy, you can't leave him in the well. You just can't leave him in the well." And my father turns around and he says, "It's him or your sister." And then he looks at me, and he says, "Do you want to trade places with him? Do you want to be the one in the well? Do you want to be the one to die? Because one of you's got to die." There wasn't anything that I could do about it. And we drove off, and whether he was still alive or not, I could still hear that little voice screaming, "Don't leave me in here, please don't leave me in." It's the middle of the night, and he comes back, and he puts me in the trunk of the car. And I know that what's in the bag, I know that it's Jimmy in the bag. And then he came and he got me out of the car, and I just fell down on the ground. When he stood me up, I just fell down on the ground, and he had a hole, and he takes the duffel bag and he puts it into the hole, and it's still sticking up a little bit. And he starts to tell me that it's Jimmy, and I don't want any of this to be happening. And my father made me go over, and he opened up the bag, and he took my hand and made me touch his head to know that that was him. I could feel this little curly, nappy hair. And then he said, "Didn't dig the hole deep enough. Guess I'm going to have to do something about that." And he picked up his foot and he crushed it down on top of his head so that you could hear the bones in his neck crack. And he said, "Still isn't going to work. Guess we're going to have to chop his head off." And he took the axe and he handed it to Steven. And he said to him, like as if it was some kind of prize, "Do you want to chop his head off? Here." And Steven just stood there and shook his head no. And I don't remember anything else after that.
Yeah, my father took me and Diane to see Jimmy's father and his grief, and Jimmy's father told my father that my father was a suspect. The police told him that my father was a suspect, and he was like, "Oh, can't you come up with anything better than that?" My father played it to the hilt and pointed to himself and said, "Me? A suspect?" I couldn't take it. I left. I went and waited in the car. My sister and my father came out, and my father sat there before we left, and he said, "Imagine that. A grown man getting completely bent out of shape because a little boy's missing." And he slammed his hands on the wheel and peeled out. We left. A lot of them looked at me just before they died, and a lot of them, some of them spoke to me and my sister with words of kindness, knowing that it was our father who was about to take their life. Some of them were tortured, some of them were cut up. Some of them begged us to not forget them. Some of them looked at us, my sister and I, with the intent that they wondered if we had helped to lure them into this position where they were about to lose their life. And I've always wanted to clear that up. I feel I have a debt to them.
I will never be whole. I will never be healthy. I will never be happy unless I tell my story and do everything I can to get this man exposed for what he is and was. When I do this, I may never be believed. I may never be accepted. I may never be lovable. So be it. I tell for myself, for the child no one would believe. For the adult no one wants to believe. I tell for my brother Stephen, who carried this burden to an even greater degree than I have. I tell for my daughter so that she will not have to keep this secret. I tell for all the souls who did not survive his reign of terror. I tell for their loved ones, their friends who have ached for them all these years. I tell for his future victims, because if he is not stopped, there will be more. I tell because it is the right thing to do, and I need to feel good and clean and lovable for the first time in my life and for the rest of my life.
Good afternoon, prosecutor's office.
Good afternoon. Can I speak to Robert Haneker, please?
Hold on, please.
Thanks.
If someone comes in and says that they've been involved in a crime, or if they know who's been involved in a crime, simply to proceed based on the allegation is not the way we do business. The way we do business is take the allegation, investigate it, and corroborate the information in order to establish proof. And in this case, we've yet to establish the proof.
Can all of this be fabricated, I wonder?
Well, see, that's the interesting aspect. I mean, that's why we still have not closed our investigation. That could all of this be a figment of someone's imagination? So could somebody put together all of these allegations and make them sound credible when in fact none of it is true?
And apparently both seeming to share some of the experience and with a kind of consistency which I find interesting.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a great deal of time with this case because of that. Yeah. So we need what the standard of some type of probable cause. And if there was something that could corroborate any of his allegations, if we would have found body parts in Massachusetts or wherever, then certainly we'd be in there in a heartbeat. If you could turn up anything that would do it, we'd work hand in hand, try to get it done, That's what we're in the business to do.